Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Breakfast Club and a whole new week. I'm super excited today because I have once again hounded someone into submission who I really, really wanted to appear on this show, and that is our Research Collections Registrar, Lindsay Palaima. Hey, Lindsay.
Hey.
Okay, so I really did hound you and bother you, and I think you literally sent me an email that said, "Sigh, I think you're not going to let me weasel out of this." Thank you for dealing with me. But also the reason I wanted you on the show is because I have always admired you from afar. You are the person I see around the Academy doing interesting things and touching objects that I want to touch that I'm not allowed to touch, like giant dioramas or big skulls or teeny tiny gems or anything like that. So thank you so much for being here. And your family's watching. And I'd like to encourage all the Palaimas to please go ahead and leave as many comments in the Facebook section as you'd like to. But also you mentioned when we were talking backstage just now that that your dad, I think, or your family was pretty integral to you getting interested in natural history and museums in the first place. So tell us about how you fell in love.
Well, I grew up in Anchorage, Alaska, so outdoors are pretty accessible. And I was mentioning to you when I was pretty little, I was interested in pinning insects. And through the local university, my dad found a bug camp. So for a week, I think, I don't even remember. I must have only been 5 or 6. So I think probably graduate students that needed some community service hours, took kids on nature walks and taught us the basics of catching and pinning. And my family always took me outside, and we had 2 local museums that we went to a lot. So I think just as long as I can remember, I was interested in the natural world and dioramas and trying to figure out what happened behind those dioramas.
Yeah. And did you always have a sense that museums were a place you could work one day, or is that something you thought about before finding your way into the career?
I really didn't know I could work at one. I think they kind of seemed abstract and distant. But luckily enough, in undergrad, I was able to intern at the Chicago Field Museum. And it was sort of all of a sudden, the skin was rolled back. I was like, whoa, there's actually careers here and scientists. It's not just mummies on display. So I really credit my undergraduate advisor for hooking me up with that internship.
Yeah.
I've been involved in museums ever since then. So I think I was 19 at the time and haven't been able to leave.
Yeah, it's a weird kind of love. Well, I'm so excited that you're here, and I'll hand it over to you in just a moment. I'll remind people watching that you can ask Lindsay questions anytime just by leaving them either in the comment section on Facebook or in the chat box on YouTube, and we'll come back at the end and ask as many as we can. And with that, I'll turn it over to Lindsay Palaima with Skeletons in the Closet. We'll see you at the end.
Hi. All right. So this is me. All right. Who am I? Why am I giving you a talk? Sort of as Laurel indicated, I'm a natural world and science enthusiast. I've worked at the Academy of Sciences for over 6 years, and I've been a volunteer with the Marine Mammal Stranding Network since 2016. Today's presentation, I'm going to be sharing a little bit about my professional work at the Academy, as well as mention about my capacity in volunteering with the Academy. So first of all, what am I? What is museum registration? As Laurel said, I'm the Research Collections Registrar at the Academy in the Institute for Biodiversity Science and Sustainability. What this means is I track the non-living collections. The Academy actually has living collections and non-living, so I broker in the dead. I'm not in charge of a collection similar to a collection manager, nor am I a subject matter expert similar to the curators. I'm more of an enthusiast for all collections, a cheerleader, and I generally take the role of nervous parent. I always am wanting the best for the collections, and I'm fretting that everything's okay with them, that they're safe, that they're not too hot or too cold, or they're cracking. In particular, I track research collections that are going out onto the public floor for exhibit. So what are research collections? The Academy is a collecting institution with over 45 million objects. And this includes birds, mammals, reptiles, amphibians, fish, coral, shells, gems, minerals, fossils, plants, insects, arachnids, mollusks, and echinoderms. I mean, even more. I just don't know all the names for them. We are an active research institution. We maintain and develop the collection for scientific research. And why are these important? It's because collections are an essential resource for scientists. They help with understanding biodiversity, they further education, Our collections support conservation, and we serve the communities. So in an effort to educate, research collections are placed on exhibit for public interpretation and delight. So what I really want to impart is how critical the collecting part is of our collections. We currently collect through scientific expedition and fieldwork. We do salvage, there's confiscation, especially with our federal partners, and we also just accept gifts. The big thing that's very important for our collections is that our collections have data. The where, the what, the how. And because I don't want anyone to forget the data part, without data, a specimen's not as useful for study. So it could still be good for education, and it's an ambassador, and it's important, to maybe entice someone to look closer. But with data, our researchers are able to see a narrative about species habitats, migrations, lifestyles. Without that what, where, how, pieces of the story are incomplete and a little less relevant. So what do our collections look like? What am I brokering with the dead? So we have dry skins, study mounts, taxidermy, skeletons, pinned insects. Then we have a whole selection of wet specimens, which I call the pickled variety. Those are generally fish, reptiles, amphibians, and vertebrates. Vertebrates are spineless. They are like nudibranchs, scorpions, and different corals. We also have a whole frozen section, which is our tissue samples. So these are samples of flesh and organ that is used for different analysis. So the Academy. We're a natural history museum, planetarium, and aquarium in Golden Gate Park in San Francisco. And our mission is to explore, explain, and sustain life. So today's talk is mainly going to be about my role in helping to explain life while putting things on the public floor. So as we sort of talked about earlier, history, I feel it's important to know and appreciate a history of a place. Museums often do have skeletons in their closet, but understanding why and how we use a collection helps me to understand how we look and observe the natural world. It also gives context to how natural museums developed. Sort of went from these curiosity cabinets in the Victorian era to World Fair leftovers to now being leading scientific institutions. So the Academy was first established in 1853 in San Francisco. And we were the first natural history museum west of the Mississippi River. Woohoo. We moved to Golden Gate Park in 1916, and we renovated in 2008. I'd like to mention that we survived the 1906 earthquake and fire, both world wars, the 1989 earthquake, and now we are still surviving in the COVID-19 pandemic. So I was first drawn in to museums through dioramas, and strangely enough, one of my first jobs at the Academy had something to do with dioramas. So diorama is a model representing a scene with three-dimensional figures, often with scenic painting. When the Academy opened in Golden Gate Park in 1916, we actually opened with our North American Hall. The hall had 15 habitats dedicated to mammals and 6 habitats dedicated to birds. The original catalog for the hall actually boasts that one of the first large halls in any museum in the world to be exclusively devoted to habitat groups of birds and mammals. So here's a picture of the now extinct California grizzly that the Academy opened up with. So in 2010, I was fresh out of grad school, and I started working as a contractor in the ornithology and mammalogy department. My job was to inventory and condition report mammal mounts in offsite storage. So in 2004, our original building closed, and all the dioramas were pulled apart, and the mammal mounts were placed in storage. So when the building reopened in 2008, it was time to sort of assess what could go where and what attention did the mounts need. Could we bring them back and put them on display, or should they go back of house into research? So the job necessitated by me was to examine the mounts closely. So a side note here is that historic taxidermy is prepared with toxic substances, most consistently arsenic. So it's critical when you're working with these collections to wear proper protective equipment, like a face mask and gloves. So here I am examining this nearly 100-year-old mount. So it was a mountain lion, a puma. So the first picture is of when it was in the catalog from the early dioramas. The second photo is how I found it in storage. So I'm gingerly examining the seams where the hide has been sewn and checking on the condition of the ears. I'm using a flashlight to get all the details. And the thing about diorama taxidermy is that you never just put something on display. You never just put the plate on the table. You need to somehow mount it to the environment. So you can see that this cat was somehow affixed to this rock. Like it couldn't just slide over, especially in case of an earthquake. So there are usually wires and screws that connect the taxidermy to the diorama somehow. In the case of this kitty, the anchor points were under the right-hand paw that you see draped over the rock, and then in the rump. So when you see it in storage, you can see it's a little off angle because of the way it's laying down. I knew this, so when I transferred them out to the examination table, I was very conscientious of this old metal sticking out somewhere. So I placed the cat on the examination table, and I pulled my arms out, and I, was kind of working, and I looked down, and since I was wearing a white lab coat and gloves, it was pretty evident when I started bleeding that I could see it. And I was like, oh no, I guess I got by, the metal got me. But I couldn't figure out how, because I knew where the metal was. Like I was very, very thoughtful about knowing where these anchor points were. And as I took off my glove and rolled back my lab coat, I realized it wasn't the metal that got me, it was the cat's claws. Like that I literally had just been scratched by a 100-year-old mountain lion. And feeling like a little overwhelmed, I didn't know what to quite do. So, I held my wrist, and as I was walking to the bathroom, I think it was before lunch, I ended up passing out. So then it turned into a bigger deal because now I'm laying on the floor, passed out with like a bleeding wrist. But luckily, everything was fine. But now I get to say that I've been attacked by a mountain lion. And when people ask for details, I have to admit that the mountain lion was already dead and it was my handling of it. But now I have a scratch on my wrist to prove it. Other things about the older taxidermy is it's pretty iconic, and I think no one will think of a natural history museum without our taxidermy. The Academy has 3 giraffes. They were originally collected for our 1936 African Hall. When we opened in the new building, we didn't quite have a place for them, but it was important that they were on the public floor. So we placed them along a southern wall. We separated them just because of the conventions of where we were displaying them. So the 2 adults were in one case, and then the juvenile was in another case. In 2015, we realized we wanted them on the north wall, which would seem like a simple move, except that we have a rainforest and the planetarium in the way. And we eventually had to actually move them all along the west hall to get them back to the east hall, just due to where columns are located and other casework. So we ended up building an entire skeleton of wood around the mounts in order to secure them. We lifted them off the ground, and then we rolled them around the Academy at like 11 p.m. They sort of looked like a ship with a giraffe neck. And when we got them, we were able to reunite the family. So that second photo, you can see that the juvenile is now back with the adults. Another thing that's funny about working at an institution that has such a long history is when you dig into the archives, you find some pretty interesting images. I want to point out that museum staff's always doing the best that we can with what we have, and that our practices have definitely evolved. The giraffes were originally in the watering hole, so the black and white photo, you can see that they're in watering hole with other animals, but you'll also see that staff is on a ladder that's leaning against them with a vacuum on them, and thus they're cleaning them. I'd like to just point out that we do have more modern techniques. If you look to the next photo, you will see that we now use lifts, we're wearing full PPE, and we're a little more ginger about how we access the taxidermy. Another funny thing I got to work on was the skulls exhibit. So in the fall of 2013, the Academy realized we needed a summer show for 2014. Some scheduling had occurred where we now had a big opening that we needed to fill. In 2003, the Academy had hosted an exhibit on skulls, so the team assumed, let's just reboot this show. It can be done quickly. I'd like to point out, it typically takes a year or more to develop and execute an exhibition. However, this team was able to develop and open Skulls 2.0 in under 7 months. That includes the 2D graphic and 3D space design, writing the story, making film vignettes, the fabrication of walls, cases, lighting, cleaning and preparing the specimens, mounting the specimens, and installation. Also, in the midst of all this, we squeezed in a partnership with Google and Sketchfab to take 3D scans of the specimens for an interactive, which are still live on our website, and developed a domestic colony to live in the exhibit. So this was a hustle, and it made sure that the team was extremely close because we were only working on this. So why skulls? What's important about this collection? So San Francisco has a local character, Ray Bandar, and he was collecting skulls and osteological material for over 50 years. In his personal residence, he had over 10,000 specimens, 6,695 catalog specimens, and 3,000 plus non-dated specimens. This is pretty unusual and non-traditional for a collection to be held off-site. However, Ray ensured that the collection was available for research. He kept a ledger, so everything had a Ray number, like a collector number, and the collection was organized and the specimens were clean. The collection was majority mammals, majority skulls. However, he also did collect reptiles, crustaceans, birds, and fish. He started collecting sea lions in high school, and his last collection was in 2013. So as you can see in the pictures, there's just piles of skulls. And when I say that they're clean, it means that he removed the flesh, the muscles, and etc. Two useful methods of skeletal prep is to bury a specimen, so sort of let earth take care of it, or to macerate, which is to put in constant contact with water, or the chicken soup method. You boil it at a low temperature until all the fat falls off. The Academy employs these methods with the addition of our domestic beetle colony, which is small insects eating away at the tissue. All this to say that I was working with Ray for these 7 months to get the skulls show open. So every day I would drive to his bone palace, and we would go through the skulls. We would look at different ways we wanted to help tell the story that the design team had come up with. And I would pack up the skulls, move them back to the Academy, clean them, and then work with the preparators to get them on display. A big draw for this show was that we had a wall of California sea lions. The image you see here was 424, but in the original show, we actually had 860. This wall is still up at the Academy. It's over the project lab. And so something that Laurel said, that she said she'd walk by and see me touching the specimens, was actually she saw me dusting the specimens. Essentially now we go up on a lift, we're wearing our full PPE, and we filter vacuum the sea lions. So just think about dusting your home or dusting your windowsills, and imagine dusting 424 heads, and you want to make sure you don't accidentally suck in any little bone or teeth, and you're up on a lift and strapped in. So it kind of contributes to some exciting mornings. Another project I got to work on is in 2018, the Academy was developing a show about California. We are the California Academy of Sciences after all, and we didn't really have an exhibit representing California. Central element to telling a story of California is the redwood. There are two types of redwood in California. There's the coast redwood, Sequoia sempervirens, and the giant redwood, the Sequoia giganteus. The Academy has a giant redwood round. However, the exhibit was focusing on the coast, so we needed a coast redwood round. How does one go about finding an old growth redwood? Redwoods are protected. They're listed on the endangered species list. So with the team, we started cold calling any and all partners. Luckily, since the coast redwood is exclusive to California and Oregon coasts, the list was relatively short. Working closely with the state of California Parks and Humboldt State University, I got to go on numerous woodland hikes with rangers, looking at trees that had fallen in storms. In early 2017, California experienced a spate of storms and a lot of trees fell, which was strangely very exciting to me. Prairie Creek Redwood State Park north of Eureka had several trees fall, and rumor had it that when one hit, it recorded on the Richter scale. Luckily for me and the researchers at HSU, this tree had not been studied before, and it fell across a hiking trail. The roads crew for the park had already cut through the tree so that hikers could hike through, but then they decided that we were permitted to take a hunk, or a cookie in logging lingo, for education interpretation. Therefore, I got to work with a group of conservationists, scientists, and a logging company to get the tree chunk out. So you can see that the tree was on the trail. So that's the first picture. And the second picture is of the ultimate display. The funny thing about getting the tree out of the woods is, how do you get an 800-year-old, 8,500-pound cross-section out of the woods? Turns out by helicopter. So I'm going to play a short time-lapse video. The full video can be found on YouTube, Making of a Redwood Round, California Academy of Sciences channel, but I'm just going to play a short bit so you can see what it's like to lift out a redwood round. Right. I have to say, when you do museum studies in graduate school, they never tell you you're going to be working with this sort of heavy machinery in the woods with chainsaws. So we got that exhibit open in 2018, and shortly thereafter, I was put on a project for our 2019 exhibit, and it was quickly ascertained that we needed to move a rhino. Coming fresh off of moving a redwood round, I was feeling a little ego that this shouldn't be a problem whatsoever. Moving a rhino up a floor was going to be a breezy task. So moving specimens is sort of a necessary collections gamble. Collection professionals are constantly strategizing on minimizing the impact of moving stuff around. However, we need to move stuff around in order to research it and understand it, and especially if we're going to display it. In this case, our rhino needed conservation work because the hooves had some damage from some pest moves. So the first picture actually is of a rhino skeleton being moved in the academies in the 1950s. As you can see, it's sort of just on a mount, and they're putting in a truck in an alleyway. Again, things have progressed in the way that we do things. You know, we had a team of 12 people helping move the rhino upstairs. We made it an entire hammock, if you will, to move it. We used different lifts. We were able to cradle and drop it. And again, it had to be very measured because of those bolts that were coming out of its feet that did not line up perfectly. So we had to build custom blocks to make sure that wherever we set it, it was going to stay upright. We actually ended up x-raying this mount in order to determine how the horns were affixed, which was pretty interesting for a historical narrative. I was sort of hoping when we x-rayed it, it would look like the skeleton that you see to your left, but it was not. It's all made of wood on the inside. The little last bit I wanted to talk about was the Marine Mammal Stranding Network. So all marine mammals are protected by federal law, even after death. And it's important to collect all the scientific information from these animals to better understand the health of marine mammal populations and the threats that the animals face. The Marine Mammal Stranding Network is a federal research program run by the National Marine Fisheries Service. And the Academy is authorized to respond and collect dead marine mammals. Biologists respond to calls of dead marine mammals, and when the carcasses are located, they examine the carcass, collect information, and take samples to identify the animal and determine the cause of death. So these samples include tissue like skin and muscle, hair, whiskers, skulls, the mandible and teeth, I think that's sea lion wall, baculum, hips and pelvic bone, and vertebra. Data, back to data, it's very important, like the location and date of the collections are critical. The scientists analyze the tissue, bone, mercury levels, parasites, and we do ship-strike morphological evidence, and that helps explain what's killing the marine mammals and informs the effective conservation recommendations. So what does it mean for me to volunteer? It means I get to assist in the necropsy of the dead marine mammals, and that's the study of the dead. And the way you study dead marine mammals is you slice the skin or fat from the carcass. It's known as flensing. And so I started volunteering with the O&M Bones Lab at the Academy, and I moved up to California sea lions and then to whales. So I just want to point out that if you see a sick or injured marine mammal, please contact the Marine Mammal Center. if you're in the Bay Area. Remember, it is illegal to approach or handle a sick or injured marine mammal, and is illegal to collect any parts of a dead marine mammal. In 2019, the Academy responded to 393 dead marine mammals, including 21 large whales. Thus far in 2020, we've responded to 56 reports, including 3 large whales. So even in the times of COVID, the Academy is moving forward, and we're developing a new gallery for showcasing the research collections. And this is going to be a dedicated space with a controlled environment. So those slides earlier where it was showing all the fish and the amphibians and the skeletons and all of that, this will be a gallery that's completely dedicated to sort of showing what our research collections are and how we're researching them and why they're relevant. And that's all I have. So.
So that was amazing.
23 minutes.
Thank you. Yeah, you're nothing if not efficient. But that was so cool. Thank you. Also, I don't know if you understand how like baller it sounds to just casually throw out "I broke her in the dead." Like you should prepare people for that, because that level of profundity, that's like a t-shirt. Like I'll get you a t-shirt. That's pretty cool. Well, we did get some questions for you, so I'm gonna dive in and start with this one from Becca, which also is very similar to one that Danny asked. So thanks to both of you. Becca's specific question was, what did you actually study in college and grad school to get your current job?
Oh, yes, I guess I skimmed over that. So my undergraduate was anthropology with a minor in classics, which when you graduate, you quickly realize means nothing. Luckily, my advisor pinpointed how much I enjoyed the internship at the Chicago field and encouraged me to look into museum studies. So after a few years in the real world, dove back into grad school and went to San Francisco State University, which is why I was actually able in 2009 to start interning at the Academy. So I've had a foothold in the Academy since grad school.
Yeah. Do they teach? So in terms of the actual kind of hands-on pieces of your job, do they teach that in those courses, or was that something you learned while interning or working with people who are already full-time?
What I liked about my program is that you get a strong academic background and sort of the ethics, nonprofit management, what is collecting, and so forth. But really, for the collection management track, they encourage internships. And I was able to intern at the Academy in the anthropology department. I interned at a whale museum in Iceland. So
cool.
That's sort of where my love of whale blubber really got ignited. I also interned at the Market Street Railway in downtown San Francisco, which was a lot of archives on the F line. So I would credit a lot of those internships were really literally where I got my hands dirty and a lot of on the job. When I started with the exhibits department for the skulls exhibit, day 2, I was in the Bone Palace. I quickly had to learn, how do I identify these teeth? Am I looking at an eye hole or a nose hole? This shouldn't be this hard, but you're usually looking at a skinned animal.
Yeah.
Luckily, there's lots of books that will help you.
Yeah.
And in the Academy, we have in-house expertise. So any questions I had, I'd get a couple eye rolls. How do you not already know this? But people explain it all to me. And now it seems second nature. I'll be walking around looking at a dog. I'm like, I know exactly where your nose is.
Your eye holes are.
I know where your eye hole starts.
Yeah. And it's fun. I mean, there's lots of things, even in my job at the Academy, obviously there's lots of things I have to ask for help on and stuff. And, you find it's really cool to work in that kind of environment where there are so many experts around you. And even if you get a tiny eye roll once in a while, it's usually good natured, because people they're only there because they love what they do and they actually really desperately want to tell you about it. Yeah. Okay. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I just say I sometimes forget how normalized what we do is. Because when I try to explain it to people that aren't in the museum profession or not used to the natural history collections, their eyes just get bigger and bigger, because I'm not looking at how you frame a skeleton. I'm looking how to support the preparators in building a structure that disappears so you only see the skeleton, but the skeleton needs to look lifelike. But it's a skeleton. So it's lacking context.
Yeah. It's cool. I like the world you work in. Also, that thing you said about how much you love blubber is the back of your t-shirt. The back of your t-shirt. So Jason asked, and and this is when you were talking about the PPE you wear, just kind of day to day, are there other chemicals or fumes that pose safety considerations when you're working with older specimens, or is it really just that dust and debris?
It really depends on what you're working with. So at the Academy, our fresher collections are actually kept in ethanol. And so you're looking at ethanol from 65% to 95%. So that fume, you know, is a completely different fume than when you're kind of going into the dustier dioramas.
Right.
You know, so we have hoods, like we take our safety quite seriously. When it comes to the older mounts, they had to prepare them so bugs didn't eat them, which, you know, before the 1950s meant really like taking the hides and just coating them in sort of a proprietary cocktail of arsenic and other things, which at the time seemed like a great idea. There's sort of these classic images of preparators with a cigar in their mouth over a vat of chemicals, which to me, you know, just brings absolute terror. But at the time was just sort of, no one wanted to tell everyone what their special cocktail was, but everyone knew sort of generally it was toxic. So the plus side is we have, you know, some museums, these taxidermy mounts are, you know, 150 years old and they still look fantastic, but that comes at the cost of the people who worked on them and the people who continue to work on them. You need to be safe. Luckily, arsenic's a pretty hard mineral. So when you're working with it, as long as you have a mask and gloves and you wash your hands and you don't really eat after work, you're going to be okay in regards to that. I mean, with dust, there's all sorts of mold spores and so forth that can come in on dust. So, you know, just best practice is to always wear an N95 when you're working that close for long periods of time.
Yeah.
In regards to our others, prep, a lot of the work is done under hoods, you know, for our researchers, because if they're working in formaldehyde or so forth, you don't want to be huffing that at close contact. And we have protocols written for all of that.
Yeah, of course. Okay, thank you. And I noticed we're getting a few questions from people who are just really excited to hear about the specimen gallery that you were talking about and kind of when that'll be open. And what I'll say, and Lindsay, please jump in, but obviously, you know, we are, like all museums, we've been hit hard by the shutdown in the wake of closure and or COVID, sorry. And so we're kind of, in terms of openings and starting to talk about new exhibits, you know, all of that stuff is happening and we're excited and like can't wait to debut it all. But it is a rolling time kind of line as we get folks back in and start to reopen and stuff like that. So please just like stay tuned to our official channels, website, social media, and we'll start talking about it as soon as we possibly can. Let's see. So Samantha asked, she was intrigued by your mention of the dermestid colony. Yes. And she wants to know how effective they are and how many insects are actually in the colony you referenced.
So the Academy has a live colony on site. And so there's those three major ways I was talking about. There's the boil method, which is great for larger marine mammals because they're super fatty. So you want to get the fat out of the bone, or you're going to attract, A, they're sticky, and B, other things are going to want to keep eating them. Then there is the buried method, which is just, it takes so long that we generally don't go that route except for super large mandibles of whales or very, very large pieces. The dermestid colony is actually perfect for smaller animals, you know, so rodents, birds, some reptiles, because the dermestids will just eat everything. I don't actually know how many dermestids are in the cases, but they need to be fed quite frequently. They sort of need that rotted flesh on the regular, or they die off. So we do actually have staff members that are still going in to feed the dermestids. Generally, when we're doing collecting, which is sort of on hold right now, we have things to give them. If we don't, we actually go buy raw meat to give them to just keep them fed. I can't say the number. It would definitely be over 1,000 beetles. I don't know if there's 50 beetles per bird or not. It's something I can definitely follow up with or inquire with. It is quite smelly, as you can imagine. It's
that's the one piece of
everyone's nightmare. You think of little bugs eating the dead flesh, but the nice thing is they're not attracted to live flesh. So handling and working with them poses no danger to yourself. You get extra smooth hands.
Yeah, it always like never mind. I was gonna like get into I was gonna dive deep into my recollection of a scene from The Mummy of being buried alive and flesh eating, which were not roasted, but anyways, I just like secretly did it while not doing it. So Anthony wanted to know, and he says, I remember a really large elephant skull in the skulls exhibit, and I always stood there and wondered how you actually got that hung.
Oh, that's a great question.
Yeah.
So if you recall, or for people who weren't able to come to the exhibit, we had a graphic of an elephant so that when you walked in, we wanted to give it some context. Because again, when you're just looking at a skeleton, sometimes it is oddly difficult to know what you're looking at without all those details. So we had a graphic of an actual elephant, and we had the skull positioned where the head would be sort of within the silhouette of the elephant. And that was about 8 feet off the ground. So in order to do that, we had a steel frame, and similar to the way that we were raising the rhino, we used a lift. And so we had crossbars over the top, and then we were able to strap it and lift it. And it was very, very ginger. Actually, there is that early slide of me standing next to it. You can kind of see the straps. But we were able to lift it, and then people were on ladders on either side holding it. So it's one of those funny things where you don't realize that you're standing under a several 100-pound skull until you are thinking about it. Like, was I really just standing on a ladder balancing this? I mean, it was totally secure, but you're just the safety to push it in to the correct location. And then you are like, maybe I should have been wearing a helmet. Would a helmet have helped? I don't know.
I think the answer is no. I'm not an expert, but you versus 800 pounds.
Anytime we move anything like that, there's an incredible amount of thought. You know, a lot of practice. We don't just like 101 in collection management is you never pick up an object unless you know your route and where you're setting it down.
Oh, interesting.
Sometimes you're in the kitchen and you pick up your coffee cup and then you're like, oh, I need a place to set it down. The phone is ringing. You never want to find yourself in that situation with a collection object. So you sort of, if you're going to pick up an object, you need to know where you're going with it and where you're going to set it. And especially in exhibition, installation, and deinstallation, it's that to the umpteenth. You have tables, you have sandbags, you have everything ready to support these irreplaceable materials that you're working with.
Yeah, I think I've seen your crew like actually rehearsing a move or rehearsing like where everyone will be for something. Yeah. Was that elephant skull also, was that an adult or was that a juvenile?
That is that's a great question. Now I can't recall.
No, I didn't mean it. Yeah, I thought I remembered it being a juvenile, and it was just so impressive in size already.
Yeah, I think it was a juvenile male. It was not, we almost acquired the tusks. The skull was given to us, and the donor's family wanted to give us the tusks so that we had the complete, setup. And unfortunately, the tusks were incinerated in the Santa Rosa fires.
Oh, wow. Okay. I didn't know that. Wow. Melissa would like to know, do you personally accept volunteers? I'm very good at vacuuming.
Oh, that would be great. I do not personally accept volunteers, but the Academy has a very robust volunteer core, which if we can't do half of our work without our volunteers. However, currently the building is closed, and we are assessing how reopening will look and what kind of safety precautions. My advice would be, if you go to our website, volunteer services, perhaps reach out and get on their radar, but I wouldn't hold my breath in the near future, unfortunately.
Yeah, we can leave a link for that in the comments section. And yeah, it may take some time to spool up, but I imagine when we reopen, we'll probably need volunteers more than ever. So thanks for the question. And then someone, so this doesn't, no name, but are ship strikes the primary cause of death for the whales that you necropsy in the Bay Area?
That's what we're trying to figure out with the data. I mean, generally, nature could take care of itself. An animal would die and we would never know about it because it just stays out in the ocean. So when an animal is showing up on the shore, we really have to wonder, how did it die? I don't have the stats in front of me, but generally what we're seeing is when we do the necropsies, we're looking at stomach contents. So we usually can figure out, were they choking on plastic? Often they're wrapped up in fishing line, or if they have the hemorrhaging of certain tissue around their rib cage or their neck, it's easy to identify that there has been a ship strike. What we do with all this grotesque data is we talk to our partners. We need shipping, we need fishing, but can we, slightly augment our behavior to not be right in the middle of a migratory pattern? If we know that the gray whales are always going to be coming up at this time of year, can the ships be on more high alert to be slower when they're coming through those channels? And the answer is yes, but you're not able to have fruitful conversations unless you have data.
Right.
Another thing I'd like to point out is some of the California sea lions, actually, a lot of them have seizures that are more due to stuff that they're picking up, chemicals in their food. So that's another thing when you're looking at the brain case, you're able to identify that that's not a ship strike, that's a different type of death, which is also an unnatural death.
Right.
But you want to figure out why, because if it's a shark, okay, that's going to happen in the open water. But if it's something that humans are doing, we definitely want to figure out how we can all work together for those solutions.
Yeah, for sure. Great. Well, I'll just ask you one more question. This is a nice one to end on. This is from Brendan. And they ask, what area of preservation or caretaking do you think has evolved the most for registrars?
Ooh. I think definitely, it seems silly, but the PPE, museum professionals used to just go, they're artists, they're creative, they're going out and they're building. And it used to just be bare hands, maybe your eyeglasses. And now I think that everyone really approaches things more thoughtfully. And there's a lot of communication about, are you comfortable going in here? If you're not comfortable, that's okay. Let's figure out how to make this a safe environment for everybody. Even in my time at the academy, just using more padding or being not as stubborn. I'm a stubborn person, and sometimes the most efficient route is for me to pick up this thing and walk at 20 feet. But that's not always the safest route, nor is it the best collections care route. So just having a communication team, I think being 4 people should actually be lifting this, and we should do it more safely and have these, better padding here.
Yeah.
So I think in the evolution, especially of collection management and preparators and registrars, it's that those are working as a team. They're not all just one person. There's more communication, and there's definitely a lot more mask and glove wearing.
Yeah. It seems like such a simple thing, but that's huge. Yeah. Yeah.
I still carry my clipboard. I have not evolved to the iPad or laptop.
I love a good clipboard.
Yeah.
I'm right there with you. Well, yeah, I can't thank you enough. I'm so glad I was finally able to talk you into coming on this show, or that I got you to a point where you were like, please stop emailing me. Fine. And we owe you a really amazing t-shirt. And before I let the viewers go, I just want to tell you about 2 upcoming breakfast clubs. On Tuesday, June 2nd, we are launching Pride Month by having back our curator of Arachnology, Dr. Lauren Esposito, who's going to talk about a visibility movement that she launched called 500 Queer Scientists, which is actually a community of 10,000 people, and just the importance of having, of ensuring that science is open to everybody, and the data behind that. And then on June 8th, which is a Monday, we're going to celebrate World Oceans Day by having 5 marine scientists come on and just talk about their various areas of work. That includes 2 of our own scientists, Dr. Louise Rocha and Rebecca Albright, but also a range of outside folks who, some of which you will know well if you're on Twitter, but all of whom have really interesting things to say about progress in that area today. So with that, Lindsay, thank you so much. And viewers, thank you so much. And we will see you Tuesday. Bye-bye.